law enforcement, retirement, and a little bit of life in general. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, Johnny Coxum, welcome.
Hi.
So, retired at 50 or 51?
I retired and then like a week later turned 51.
51, okay. What was your occupation that you retired from?
I was a police lieutenant at SUNY New Paltz, State University of New York, New Paltz.
Okay. And you also taught at the police academy as well from time to time, or?
Yeah, I did that for, actually I'm still doing it, about 20 years.
Did the pandemic affect your decision to retire when you did?
It had some influence in it. Well, kind of the changing of law enforcement and the pandemic kind of at the same time. Some of the laws were changing. And then the pandemic came in. It definitely had some influence on me making the decision to retire. We were going to come back starting the semester under the pandemic rules and guidelines, which to me, I don't know, it seemed like it was going to be a little weird, difficult, okay. Just different. And the fact that I was at retirement time, just kind of went hand in hand and just kind of pushed my decision to make that move, along with some other things, some other political stuff, and things like that.
Okay.
Some history. But all that stuff culminated into, in addition to the pandemic, all culminated into pushing my decision.
And so I'm sure you're happy with the decision.
Absolutely. I don't regret it one bit.
Okay. And how's retirement been? I don't know how many months it's been, but.
Well, it's definitely been a little strange because of COVID. I probably would have been out and about a little bit more, but we're kind of all stuck inside. Some of the things that I did on the side, like for instance, I DJ, so I'm not doing as much of that as I would have been doing. So let's put a damper on that. But otherwise, I mean, retirement's been great. I mean, I don't have a schedule, which is, I think, one of the best things that I believe I'm getting out of it, that I like about it. Not having a schedule, not having to be anywhere, and I think a lot of people they pause or they hesitate to retire because of financial reasons, and fortunately, I didn't have that issue. So again, that also kind of helped push the decision that I wasn't going to be in that financial rut, to not be able to do it.
Okay, and then. I've had many conversations with a lot of retired individuals for whatever reason. Do you feel lost or in a funk because you're retired and don't have a schedule or a place to be and things like that?
Not at all. Okay. I think one of the things that people get into is they get into this life where there's no life without work. And that just was not the case for me. There are a lot of things that I'd like to do outside of work, and now that I'm not working, I just get a chance to do more of it. It's fantastic.
I believe it. I tell a lot of people when I have that conversation, it's like, I feel like retirement is an opportunity to actually live life actually, because you can now do whatever you want, and you would hope that pensions or, again, financial stuff is available to you so you can actually do what you want to do now that you put in all this time and work for however many years. Now, a lot of people say that 51 is a young retirement. How long were you in law enforcement?
I was in it and working for SUNY New Paltz for 22 years.
Okay. 22. I thought it was 25 or something.
Well, I normally you would have to do 25, but I purchased back some military time, so I was able to leave a little early. But you have to have 25. I ended up with 25, but I only actually physically did 22 years.
Oh, double convenient. A win-win. So what brought you into, what made you decide, like, I'm going to do this? I mean, I'm sure, I don't know if you had that mindset, like, I'm going to do this for however many years until I retire, but what was how did the decision go where, okay, this is what I'm going to do for however long, this is my next job for however long?
Well, at the time when I got the job, I didn't have a set time that I was going to do it for.
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of was a job at the time. I figured it was going to be a career,
mm-hmm.
but again, I didn't set a timeline on it as to when I was going to stop. Mm-hmm. And then as it got closer to the time that I needed to have to retire, again with the pandemic and politics and the way policing was going, it just kind of, again, pushed my decision to leave, to stop doing it. And I just want to add, just because I'm retired from mm-hmm. that doesn't mean I'm actually retired. I still mm-hmm. have the option, which is a great thing about retirement. I have the option to do other things. And okay. I already have some things going on. Like I said, I mentioned the DJing. Mm-hmm. I'm a substitute teacher for BOCES, as you know. You mm-hmm. know, once things get back to normal, I'll still be doing other things anyway. I'm not retired as in not doing anything. Right. And I'll just continue to do those things. And I still have the option to do mm-hmm. something else, whatever that might be. Right. But I have the time and the freedom to do that.
Okay. And so, 22 years, when did you, I guess, how old were you when you joined? I can't do the math right now for whatever reason, but when you joined, what was going on in your life at the time? Like marriage, kids, like whatever it was, what was going on at that time when you joined?
Well, I was 29 years old when I started there. I just had your sister. Okay. Just had her. Just graduated from SUNY Cortland. Mm-hmm. Just graduated from college, and then I got the job there. I mean, it was a fantastic time. A lot of good things was going on in my life at that time. And we had to move here from Cortland eventually mm-hmm. To New Paltz. So we had to get that stuff going, get that together. Mm-hmm. Then I had to do the police academy, so I had to kind of do the back and forth from here to Cortland, because my wife and you and your sister were still in Cortland. Mm-hmm. Again, she was just born, so I had to kind of put all that together. Mm-hmm. So a lot was going on at that time.
Okay. So how did you discover New Paltz as the destination?
Well, your mom had went to school here. Mm-hmm. She had went to college at SUNY New Paltz. We loved the area, loved the atmosphere, so it was kind of a no-brainer once I got a canvas letter mm-hmm. To make the decision to choose where I wanted to work. Okay. So,
and how do I word this? Has being a police officer, how has it changed over those 22 years? Like, I don't know if you can do a 5, 10, 15, 20, or how you, I guess, can mentally landscape it. How was that journey, that transition from law enforcement now, which I'm sure was totally different from 22 years ago?
Well, I can go in several directions with that, but just to touch on a few, I think basic things for me. Mm-hmm. For one, when I first started, it was just all paper. Like everything was paper. Now we have everything is digital, everything's electronic. We have computers in the cars. You know, that was just unheard of when I started back in 1998. Nowadays we have social media. We have everything captured on a cell phone or a camera. Mm-hmm. And speaking of cameras, we have cameras everywhere. So everything that everyone does is pretty much tracked. It's recorded. So you have that in the back of your mind while you're doing your job. And again, you have people filming you at this point with their cell phones. Mm-hmm. So we have that electronic digital age that came in. Again, when I started, we didn't have any of that stuff. Mm-hmm. So that kind of changed things. And then with social media, again, this is just my opinion on it. With social media, YouTube, Facebook, everybody's broadcasting one incident to 1 million people all at once. Mm-hmm. when I started back in the day, you'd have to wait. You'd have to call people. You'd have to, it took a lot more time
More investigation
for this stuff to explode, onto the scene and for everybody to get the information. So that in itself, I think, kind of changes things. And then just recently, with bail reform, a lot of the laws changed about arrests. So, and a lot of people kind of weren't with it, not with it. So it just kind of, just again spurred me on to make that decision to retire, because it was there anyway, and any of those little kind of negative things behind me just helped me make that decision faster.
Okay, and a quick question, just from hearing what you said. So, in terms of being under surveillance at all times, both on either side of the situation, would you say it was more stressful or easier because you had proof or you could see the entire situation? Was it more stressful because you have to think about your actions at all times, almost 24/7 when you're on the clock? Like, how would you gauge that stress or adjusting to that new technology?
Well, for me personally, there wasn't really much stress on my part. The stress that I gained, I guess, was from other people's stresses. Other guys and gals on the job that were complaining about that kind of stuff. Social media, there were a lot of people kind of getting into trouble because of body cameras and cameras in the area and surveillance and things like that, even though they shouldn't have been doing things that were, could have been bothersome or worrisome for them. But the fact that other people were complaining about all of that, and again, for me, the social media part where everything can just explode in a moment's time, like an incident is just, everybody knows it and everybody's talking about it and everybody's critiquing it. It really kind of changed the game. And then it kind of helped the media in its way and in its fashion, kind of when those bad things did happen, they just kind of pushed and pushed and pushed, and you see these things happening over and over again in one day on the news, and it just kind of, I think, bombarded people's minds and put a certain perspective of law enforcement in people's minds.
Interesting. And that's really interesting because things with George Floyd and things like that, and Black Lives Matter, rallies, protests, what have you. What would you say? Do you think that law enforcement has always, or there's always been those bad officers? Because that's how people like to describe it. There's just a few bad ones.
Bad apples.
Exactly. So, would you say that? I mean, and again with social media and everyone having it broadcasted to them, do you think there's been a change in the aggression of law enforcement, or has it always been this level? We've just never seen it like this because of technology changing? Or like, what's your thoughts on that situation?
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. I think, like you mentioned before, about the stresses of the surveillance and the scrutiny. I think it kind of added a little bit of, I guess you say, the aggression. I guess it added to some of the aggression with some officers. Not all officers. Not all officers are bad apples. But I'm sure there are some where that added stress added to their aggression, so to speak. And then there's also, like I said, the explosion of everything all at once. You're getting it in real time sometimes. Not everybody gets the real story a lot of the times. So with the aggression, when you were asking about the aggression, I think it's a little bit of the surveillance stress and also just individual personalities, so to speak. Not everybody's a bad apple, but there are a few.
Okay. And when you're in, well, okay. I don't know if you want, how comfortable you are answering this question. Would you say that there's racism within law enforcement? That system?
I'm gonna preface it like how I always feel about it. I don't exclusify it, if that's a word. I don't exclusify it to law enforcement. I think because there's racism in the world, in society, in America, there's just automatically going to be some racism within law enforcement because, again, there are individual personalities, there are individual upbringings, there are individual beliefs. I think it's inevitable that it's going to happen. And again, I think it's less than there is more. But I think it does exist. There's a little bit of it here and there.
Okay. And there's been, I guess, a push for, well, I think it actually just happened, defunding of law enforcement in certain states. Not sure if it's different states or all together. What are your thoughts on the defunding of law enforcement? Do you think that's the right method to answer for what's going on, or do you think that's not the right way to approach a solution?
I don't really think that is the best answer to approach the solution. It almost to me sounds like a tit for tat. Well, you're doing this, so we're gonna take this. It almost feels that way. But I don't think that's a good idea. Defunding your police department, that organization that's supposed to be protecting and serving, taking away from them in order to fix the problem. I think they really need to look at the problem and really work on that. The fact that we're getting funded, I don't understand how that's the problem.
Right.
And then taking away how that's going to solve the problem. I don't understand that.
Okay. And I know a few other black police officers that were in these, were on the job when these friendly protests, rallies, what have you, were going on, and they still have to be police officers while this is happening, and it's in many cases the Black Lives Matter, but they're being called pigs, but they're watching a Black Lives Matter rally at the same time, and they're kind of in the mix with it, like they're being called pigs, they're being harassed.
You mean the black officers?
Yes, and they're like, if this is not saying, because it's Black Lives Matter, it's for me, and you're treating me like this, they've just been in this weird, I don't even know if it's a gray area, but this weird area. What, did you experience that at all, where it's like, okay, but understand, I know at this point you all think law enforcement is bad altogether, but understand what this rally is supposed to be for, what the position I'm in. What's your thoughts on that? What experience have you had with it? Anything?
I did actually experience that, and honestly, now that you mention it, it kind of sort of had something to do with my decision to retire. I was caught up I was actually on patrolling through one of those protests, Black Lives Matter. This was right after the George Floyd incident here in New Paltz. And it didn't sit well with me. I was on patrol. I had to actually drive through the protests, and I'm not that guy. But when I'm getting a crowd of people approaching my vehicle, shouting at me, cursing at me, almost like they were kind of on the attack, for me, it didn't sit well with me because, again, I'm not that guy. I try to do the best I can. I try to be pro community, and then to have that happen to me, it was a little bit kind of like a slap in the face. And I understand people are upset, people are, outraged, and I know the incident, but it just felt weird for me being one of the good guys, having to go through that. Mm-hmm. So that also
affected the decision.
Had something to do with me making a decision to, and I could see how things were changing towards law enforcement mm-hmm. when that was going on. Okay. So I kind of was looking at the future, mm-hmm. and again, it kind of hurt me inside a little bit. So
mm-hmm. Now, was there a morale situation when you first joined? Was there like, I want to join law enforcement because I want to make this change, or I want to be this person that is on this side, and I want to make changes from the inside? Like, was there any question or, I don't know, influence of that when you decided to join in the first place?
Yeah, I was in the military. Uniform, discipline, looking sharp, professionalism. That was all instilled in me in the Navy. Okay. That was all instilled in me. And when I got out and I started looking at law enforcement, I did look at it as something where I could go in, instill that professionalism, be professional, go into the community, show a different side, I definitely had that intention mm-hmm. going in when I started. I wanted to kind of change the game a little bit, but mm-hmm. I can't do that by myself.
Right. Were you the only black officer on your, I guess, team at SUNY New Paltz?
I was at the time, yes. Well, no, let me backtrack. There was one officer who actually, not long after I got there, he left. So I ended up I think he was there maybe 6 months. I don't even think it was 6 months. Mm. But not long after I got there, he left. So I ended up being the only black officer mm-hmm. in the department for quite a while, actually. Mm. That's changed now. We're quite diverse now. But at that time, for quite some time, for many years, I was the only black officer in the department.
Now, was that uncomfortable in any way, shape, or form? I mean, I know because, at this point, I've had social gatherings with these fellow officers of yours. Was there ever a time where it was awkward or felt like you were the odd one out? I mean, obviously we are black, so there is many situations where we are the odd ones out. We're the only ones in this situation that are black. Was there any moment like that for you when you were during your tenure there?
No, not so much. I've always been pretty confident guy. Mm-hmm. No, actually, I felt pretty privileged actually to even just get into law enforcement and be part of that. Whether it was at New Paltz or Cortland or wherever, I just felt good to be a part of the organization, just law enforcement. Mm-hmm. At the time that I got in, and I think I've had a great career there. Mm-hmm. I've never really had any of those awkward moments. I never felt like singled out or anything like that. As a matter of fact, I had all but good times there at SUNY New Paltz.
Okay. And have you seen a change in being on campus? The mindset, the activities, interactions of students while there? Because I feel like students now, I don't know, I feel like life is different. Like at one point, people were going to college for free. Now there's a lot more, you could say there's a lot more stress. Would you say that or have you seen any change in behavior among the students, just observing as the big brother, so to speak? Like, you know.
Wow, that's an interesting question. Definitely there has been a change, especially there at New Paltz. When I first got there was a lot more physical activity going on, a lot more gatherings.
This is, sorry to cut you off, this is prior to pandemic cutting social activities off. You're saying even before the pandemic, students before were more interactive.
Well, I'm talking. I was actually going all the way back to when I started.
Mm-hmm.
They were a lot more interactive, a lot more. Again, there was a lot more physical activity. We were dealing with more physically active cases.
Like aggressive behavior.
Okay. Fights. Actually, the students got together to party more.
Mm-hmm.
There's less of that. If there are more parties, they're a lot more hidden away.
Mm-hmm.
There used to be a lot more, out there where we could hear and see it and just pretty much go right to it. Not so much of that these days, and especially now with COVID, they're restricted, by the rules of campus now anyway. But before pre-COVID, and again, like when I first started, it was a lot more active on campus, and the students they got together a lot more, and even the events that they had, there were a lot more people there. I've seen that kind of dwindle down over the years. The amount of students that actually even showed up at events, and I think a lot of that is social media. We've seen a lot of depression and anxiety with the students, so that kind of antisocial personality kind of coming out. So I think that has a lot to do with what we've been seeing these days.
Okay. And I'm thinking about, there was one time where, and you mentioned this before, protect and serve as the quote, it's on the cars a million times. We talked about breaking our jobs down to a sentence and what that is. And I agreed with you on this. Mom had her thoughts and my friends had their thoughts. What was the sentence you broke your job down to?
Now keep in mind, it's just supposed to be a sentence. There's a lot more that we actually end up doing, and we do. But in a sentence, it was somewhere along the line of our job as law enforcement is to bring someone, a person, people to court to answer for their crime, and also protect and serve. We end up doing a whole lot of other things, but bottom line, one sentence, nutshell, our job as law enforcement is to enforce the law. And the way we do that is to bring somebody to court to answer for their crime, whether it be by an appearance ticket, or we take them to court by force, or maybe not by force, but to get them to court so they can answer for their crime.
I have no issue with that sentence. I personally feel like you broke it down to its simplest parts, and it also makes sense because as law enforcement, are you not protecting and serving me by having these people brought to court to answer for their actions? I think it makes perfect sense. A lot of people say, well, aren't they supposed to be a part of the community and do little, be a part of fundraisers or something, whether interacting with kids at the park or what have you. I just thought that was really interesting. And that connection to what's been going on with, again, George Floyd and things like that, do you feel that officers in their training or whatever it is are missing the situations that's happening now is because they're missing that definition of their job? Like, you don't need to put your knee on someone's neck for a certain amount of time. Your job is to bring someone to court for their actions. So yeah, how do you feel? Do you feel like that's missing in the training or the developing of police officers today?
I don't know if it's necessarily missed in the training. I think it may be forgotten as officers do their jobs. They forget what that nitty gritty bottom line thing is for them to be doing as a law enforcement person. And I don't want to say that we shouldn't be out there in the community getting to know the children, getting to know the parents, getting to know the shop owners and the store owners. I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing those things. That makes the job so much better. But going back to the one sentence to sum up what our job is, that's basically what it is. But when we start to put our personal egos and feelings into that job, that's where it becomes troublesome. We have to kind of take those feelings and those egos out of that part of the job. Do the job without the ego and the extra feeling behind it. Let the courts deal with the people, and we don't have to have that animosity, that aggression, that stress behind doing the job. But that a lot of times that ends up being the case.
So when you're at the police academy and you're what's the class, or what's actually in general, what's the structure for the police academy for you? Like, because I don't know, the police academy is a requirement before you join law enforcement?
Before you actually start doing the job.
And what's that process in general from start to finish? Like, how does that go?
Well, there's the physical fitness. Like, I think everyone is aware of the physical fitness part of it. You have to be able to pass the standards for that. There's a lot of classroom work, police ethics, procedural law, things like that. So it's quite lengthy, actually, the police academy. But you got to learn how to be a police officer. Again, learn the rules and laws, and they want you to be physically fit, and they want you to be able to go out on the road and take a lot of the public's angst against you, which is, I believe one of the reasons why, sometimes you'll be yelled at in the academy and also in the military. They want you to kind of develop a tough skin, because you're going to have to deal with people who might say things to you that you're going to have to kind of just brush off. And if you're not able to do that, that's where the ego and the extra feelings come in, and it can be troublesome for law enforcement, for the organization, where you got those bad apples that are letting that, or outwardly giving that reaction to people.
Okay. And so you teaching at the police academy, and what subject, I guess, or what do you teach at the police academy? It's
actually 3 classes in one. It's like a 5-hour class. The bulk of it is cultural diversity, and then there's sexual harassment and bias-related incidents or hate crimes.
Okay. And how, it not being a requirement for you to work at SUNY, what made you want to teach those classes at all?
Well, for one, I always kind of wanted to teach. And again, I'm a sub at Osterbosi. I still do that. I'm still with them, which I enjoy. I like to teach. And then it's just another way of me kind of giving back to the police community. Just like I'd like to give back to the community. When I was on the job there at SUNY New Paltz, did a lot of community policing. So this was my way of giving back to the police community as well. They were looking for instructors, and I just wanted to be a part of that.
Okay.
And be able to put my spin on things as an instructor.
Okay. And how long, you might have answered it already, how long have you been doing that at the police academy?
Almost 20 years. I think it's been like 17, 18 years.
Okay. And then what would you say is like the most interesting thing these in development police officers don't realize or don't understand about the job when they're in the police academy?
Well, when you go to the police academy, you're kind of learning the nuts and bolts, again, classroom work, the book part of policing. Not until you're actually on the street and you're doing the job, the reality of things, do you really get to know how to do the job.
Okay.
I think they do the best they can with the again, the basics, but you really don't learn the job until you're out there, and it really depends on where you're going to be working in the first place, because every community is so different. So.
Okay, and then have you experienced students that you've had end up being police officers? Like, you know them personally? Like, I remember teaching this kid, and now he's out here.
Oh, absolutely, a bunch.
What's that? I'm sure there's not much to say about it, but how is that experience when you see a student that?
It makes me feel older every time. Because I've seen guys on the job that I taught the class like 15 years ago. It's like, wow. And they're like, I remember you were my instructor. And I'm like, oh boy, I'm feeling my age.
Oh man. Do you feel old?
No, not really. Not really. Not really. But it's also good to see those young men, and most of the time it's just the men, but there are also some young ladies that I run into every now and then, but it's mostly guys that I run into on the streets, or they'll patrol. I actually saw somebody recently that they remembered me as their instructor patrolling this neighborhood. And I stopped and had a little chit chat. But it's good to see those guys actually out on the road and working. I always tell them stay safe, because they're just starting out, and here it is, I'm retired. They got a ways to go. So,
Is it kind of, how do you, I guess, register, get into the police academy? Because I obviously don't know what it's like, but also, I mean, I know what college is like. What is it like going through the police academy?
You mean like, is it tough? Is it easy?
Well, like, is it like college where you sign up for classes and then it's like, okay, 4 years, here you go, get out of here? Or like, what's that whole experience like? I don't know. Even like, is there a registrar's office? Is that like, you know what I mean? Like, what is that whole experience?
Well,
like, okay, I want to be an officer. How do I end up at the police academy, and then what happens going forward?
Well, I heard you ask about kind of doing a comparison with college. Usually, you're either sponsored by a town or village, or you're hired by a police agency and they send you to the police academy. As far as the police academy itself and comparing it to college, when you're in the police academy, you're in there to try to finish it so that you can start your career. We're talking about a career starter here. Or if you don't graduate, if you don't make it out, we're talking about a career ender, possibly.
Okay.
You can try it again, but it's kind of tough to go through that, not make it, and then have to do it again. So, college, you're trying to get your education and you're trying to get your degree, but this, you're trying to get a career. You're trying to start a career by graduating, because once you're done, now you're at your job. Some people are already on the job and they're going through the academy while they're working. But if you don't make it, you don't work. You don't go into that career field that you're looking to get into.
So you said that they may be in the field while taking classes. So what does the police academy do for you if you can already be in the field while taking classes?
Well, you have to complete that academy.
Whether you're in the so
yes,
if you don't make it, you're out.
You can't stay on the job.
Okay.
You have to complete that police academy. A matter of fact, I taught a class yesterday, and one of the students was telling me that they were like dispatching, doing some desk work at the police department that they're going to be working at. So they're sending them to the police academy.
Okay.
They still have to complete that police academy in order to stay working there and to become an officer on the road, carrying a gun, driving a squad car.
So, what is, you said either sponsored by the agency or sent there by the police agency or sponsored by the town? How?
Town, village. I don't know exactly how that works.
Okay.
I kind of never really understood how that works, but
because when you said it, I was like, what is that even?
Yeah, so they're sponsoring you to go to this police academy. Again, I don't know what all the paperwork, how all that process goes, but a lot of guys are sponsored by their town, their village. How, I don't know. I would guess that probably through the village board, town board, to make that decision to sponsor you. And then there's the other way where you get hired by an agency and then they send you. They're paying for your to go into for the academy, for the agency.
And it's, how long is the time period in the police academy?
I believe now it's like 4 months, like a 4-month process.
When
I went, it was a little less than 4 months.
Oh.
I went from like August to December.
I don't know why.
Late August.
Longer than that.
I thought 4 months.
6 to 9 months. Well, I'm obviously not in it, but that's interesting.
Actually, I think it's more now that I'm thinking about it. I think it might be up to 6 months now. That's
what I thought. I mean, again, I have no experience in the matter, but
yeah, because from the time I went, they've added some more curriculum. I mean, we got terrorism now because we didn't have terrorism going on when I started. Not like that. I know they've added that since. So there's been a couple of other added curriculum over the years.
I'm assuming that was a response to 9/11, or
correct.
Okay. So, with added curriculum, however long it is, and the situation we're in, do you personally think that there is enough training? Do you think there's areas where more training may be needed? If you were in the situation to make decisions, what would you do? For any of that.
I think the training is pretty adequate. Again, you don't really learn the job until you're out working anyway. I think there just needs to be a lot more community policing, just community policing, and there needs to be almost a focus on people who want to do that, because even though the agency may want community policing, you may be hiring people who don't want to have anything to do with that, and that's tough. That's going to be tough for them to have to go out and interact with the community, and they don't really want to, or they don't really have the
morality, or
they don't have that the motivation to just go out there and do that. You know, it's best to have people who who want to do that, who want to go out and without being forced, to go out and do those foot patrols and walk into the deli and talk to people and walk down the street and say hello to the kids and, go to the events and things like that on their own.
Now, do you think the public, like teachers, parents, what have you, do you think that they now may have their kids think about police a different way? Like, do you think it would be harder to go into, say, a local bodega for a police officer? Like, do you think now the people in the bodega, after seeing social media and the news, might be like, I don't even want you?
Some people have. There's been some stories where people, don't want you here today, that kind of thing. The eyes, the scorning. Yeah, I'm sure it happens. And it has. I've heard some stories. I don't want to go into an individual, but I've heard some stories of this, just shunning. It could be just a day or two, or, where they're just not looking at them the same way they were before. But again, George Floyd kind of changed a lot of things and the way people are looking at police. And I felt it myself, personally, so.
And I'm trying to think. So, for young cops, and then specifically young black cops, what words of wisdom, or what advice would you give to them at this moment?
Young black officers.
Officers in general, the ones that, I don't know who that individual is, but white, black, Asian, what have you, whatever it may be. Do you have words of wisdom or suggestions for them given their situation? Because it was not the same during your entire career, so
yeah, I have to start out by saying be very extra careful. I mean, we're always, telling each other stay safe, stay extra safe. As a matter of fact, that during my last days before I retired, I used to feel myself kind of looking over my shoulder a little bit more than I was when I would go get a cup of coffee or something. I would find myself looking over my shoulder a little bit more, being a little bit more aware and alert, more so than I ever was, especially after that day that I spoke about patrolling through the protests. For black officers, I'd say if you can convince your friends, your family members who might be interested in law enforcement, join. Just join. I mean, there's an outcry of there's not enough minorities. That if you can just use your power of persuasion to get your friends, relatives, whoever it may be, that are even remotely interested in law enforcement, if you can get them to pursue it, do that. And just again, officers in general, be extra safe. Try to do a little bit more of community policing. I know it's going to be tough now because again we are a little more scrutinized than we were before. But do the best you can at trying to mend the relationship when we're in non-enforcement situations.
Okay. And then, I guess for non-black officers, do you have a different advice for them or words of wisdom?
Well, I mean, again, just like I just said, just staying safe and getting out and trying to mend the police community relations. Okay. Again, not during enforcement situations. During the neutral downtimes, again, just going into the Dunkin' Donuts or the restaurant, or just going in and saying hello, how's things? Is there anything that you feel we could be doing better? Just striking up a conversation, talking with the parents, playing with the kids, as much as you can. Just getting a little bit more involved in the community at a non-enforcement level.
Okay, and then for body cams, is that a requirement for all law enforcement?
Not all, but it's getting there. It's getting there. I think, again, with the George Floyd incidents and then other incidences, the public is outcrying for it. The agencies are outcrying for it. It's not a bad thing. Body cams are not a bad thing. Sometimes they protect you. Sometimes they hurt. Depending on what's going on. But they're not a bad thing. Okay. And again, it's just one of those things we didn't have when I started. The body cams. Some agencies had it, but it wasn't widespread as it became over time. And again, due to incidences that didn't go so well.
Okay. So, and I asked that because I know these officers now, not just because you work with them, but because, I'm, as Mom would say, gallivanting in town. They see me. It is what it is, and I don't have that, and not just because you're my father, but I don't have that. I've never wanted to get in trouble. So it's not like, fuck you or whatever. Like, I've never had that negativity. And I say it's not, it has nothing to do with you being my father, but because I'm sure there's kids that like, oh, I hate my dad because he's a police. Like, I'm sure there's that dynamic. But in general, I've never tried to be in trouble with officers. But in a recent interaction with an officer that knew me, I'm pretty sure he cut the camera off. Now, is that, maybe I'm seeing this wrong, is that possible? Can you just turn it off whenever, when you're on patrol or anything like that? Can you turn it off, or is it like when you clock in, it's on until you clock out?
But the body cams, they can vary. Some of them are, manually turned on, manually turned off. Some automatic. Again, they all vary.
That's interesting to me.
I'll leave that there. They vary, but they're not all automatic. They're not all automatic. They can be manual.
Okay. Because when that happened, I was like, if you could turn it off, what's the point in having it?
And it sounds like you may have even witnessed that, where he actually manually maybe turned it off.
And I'm gonna say my memory is fuzzy on that, but I'm thinking whether I have that situation wrong or not, if it's possible to turn it off, I think that's very interesting, because then I would question what's the validity in even having it, because they can turn it off if they feel like doing it. And it was a friendly conversation between me and this officer, but if it was bad and they had bad intentions, whatever, I thought it was very interesting how that worked. But that's why I asked. And do you know when, I guess for you, how recent that was that you saw or had to use body cams? Because you, at some point, did you have to have body cam on?
Oh yeah, we have,
so
what
time now. Did that? What year?
Gosh, what? I can't remember
how
exactly
long,
when.
how many years?
But it's been a few years now. We've had them for quite some time.
Over 5.
And also the car cams. We've had them for quite some time.
Car cams are new as well.
Those are more automatic.
Okay. If the car's on, then it's on.
When you turn on your lights.
Okay. And that's as new, same time, a little bit before, a little bit after body cams?
I think we got the car cams before the body cams, if I can remember correctly.
Okay.
Wasn't too far out though. They pretty much came together. But it's been quite a while now. It's been a few years.
Okay. And then I feel like there's more questions every time you answer. For having kids in the community that you are policing, how was that experience for you in any way, shape, or form you can describe it? How was that, having a son and daughter in the same town that you police?
Well, I mean, you guys didn't really get into trouble, or I wasn't really worried about any of that stuff. Not only that, my jurisdiction, my place of business was the campus, so you guys didn't really frequent there too often. So, I guess if I had to worry, I'd be worrying about you getting in trouble out there with a New Paltz town police officer. But I really wasn't worried about that with you guys. You guys are good kids.
Okay, public, good kids. And I'm trying to. There was one specific question I had. How's mom doing with your retirement?
I'm not sure. You'd have to ask her that. I think she's doing okay, but
because I've spoken to some families and friends, and they're like, my dad couldn't stand when mom was retired, or the other way around, and they're like, well, they're just sitting in the house, or this or that. So that's why I wonder.
Yeah, you have to ask her that. Maybe that's another podcast for you.
Yeah. So the next year or two, I mean, obviously the pandemic will have an effect on it, but for you, 5-10 years of retirement, what are things looking like?
Wow, that's a good question. Well, your mom still has some time to work. She's mentioning retiring soon, I think. So it kind of depends on what happens in the next at least 5 years. Me, again, once this pandemic is over, I'll continue to do the stuff I was doing. And then we'll see what happens in 5 years.
Where would you like to be?
5 years, where would I like to be? Maybe somewhere south, warmer weather.
Florida's better.
Florida's far. It's a ways.
I did not expect you to say that.
It's a ways. North, South Carolina maybe, but Florida's a ways. But still not out of the realm of possibility. So we'll see. I do like the Florida vibe though.
Yeah, well, it's always warm and mostly humid. That's for sure.
Well, it's not always warm. It's been having some cold spells. Some unusual cold spells, but for the most part, it's nice.
Okay. And I guess nearing the end here, what was the Navy like?
The Navy, quite interesting. The Navy was good to me as well. I did 3 years. The reason why I actually left the Navy was because of your mom. The times being spent away from her, I didn't want to deal with that anymore. So I ended up getting out of there. Wasn't a bad experience. Don't regret it at all. It helped me become the person I am today. Probably even helped me go into law enforcement. But yeah, I like the Navy. The Navy, I have no regrets about the Navy. But because of your mom, I couldn't do the 6-month cruises away and things like that. So yeah.
And what got you into that decision?
The Navy?
Yeah.
Actually, a buddy of mine in high school, he had just right after graduating out of high school, he had went in. And he was talking to me about it. He was supposed to be like a Navy SEAL. That didn't happen. But I ended up following him. And if it wasn't for him, I probably wouldn't have been there. I probably would not have been there. And then getting out of high school and being not really sure about what I wanted to do. But it just seemed like a place to go at the time.
Do you still have friends from the Navy or like people that you talk to from the Navy from time to time?
Well, there's that buddy that I mentioned that got me in, or who helped me get in. I still talk to him. We're still friends. We still get together. Other than that, not really. Not too many people from the Navy that I still am in contact with. No.
And speaking of contact, I meant to ask this before. You still talk to the guys that you worked with at SUNY?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. And have you had have you had conversations with other retired people recently?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And they've been retired as longer?
Oh, longer.
And how are they enjoying retirement?
Everybody's enjoying retirement.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so they're not lost.
When I tell them my reaction, they're like, "Yep, see, I told you you're gonna love it." So,
wow.
Nobody that I've spoken to has any regrets about retiring.
So, as I would think, no one should be afraid of retirement.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say that. There are some people who I think I mentioned in the beginning, financially they just can't. They can't do it.
Okay. But I mean, yeah, I mean, like, I don't know. I don't know what I would do with myself. I don't know
Oh, yeah.
people. Not the financial that, but those people.
That's a problem. When you can't, at least I feel it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
When you can't find something else to do outside of your job, then that means you don't have a life.
Mm.
There's a lot to life.
Right.
There's traveling. I was one of these things that I said I was going to do when I retire. I'm going to go eat at a different restaurant every week.
Mm.
You know, I can sit on the porch and take time drinking my cup of coffee and read the newspaper and work out and get fit. There's so many things around the house for people to do, to fix, to clean. That's the cobwebs out of the corner. There's so many things to do. But if you can't figure out what to do when you don't have a job, when you're not working, I think that's a problem. What do people do on their days off? You just do more of it.
Yeah.
But you're not worrying about that schedule. You have to go back to work. You just do more of the stuff you would normally do on your days off. And then the funny part about it is there's this thing where everybody's like, thank God it's Friday. Why? Why are you thinking God it's Friday?
Yeah.
You can't figure out what you're going to do now. When now there's no more thank God it's Friday, it's every day's Friday, and it's like now you can't figure out what to do.
Right.
I don't know. That's like I don't even know.
No, we're in the same boat there. I'm very, very confused with individuals like that. Very confusing.
Yes.
I've never questioned what I'm gonna do with my now free time. Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me, and obviously you personally. So yeah, thank you guys for joining us, and thank you for joining me.
I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.